Hey everyone, this is Ahsan Raza from Century 21 Innovative Realty. Thank you for joining us for episode number 2 for my webinar series. And today I've got a very special guest on the show. I've got Nabeel Naqvi from Naqvi Law, who's going to be breaking down a lot of information about closings for buyers and sellers, what to look out for, what are some of the common pitfalls. And if you're a buyer or a seller looking to buy in the next 6 months, 12 months, or whenever, this video is going to be really important. So I do recommend watching it in entirety, so you can get all the information you can from Nabeel, who is an expert professional when it comes to real estate law. So thank you, Nabeel, for coming on the show. Really appreciate it, man.
My pleasure, man. So glad that we were able to do this.
Yeah, finally. So we go way back. I would say probably 20 plus years,
That's right, at least.
So we grew up in the same community. We share a lot of same of the commonalities, like sports, whatever.
Yeah.
We grew up in the Vince Carter era, right?
We did, absolutely.
We saw Leafs get out of the first round a few times.
We did,
This generation hasn't seen that yet, but we have. So those are some commonalities. But I think one thing we never really thought about was that in 20 years, you and I are going to be working together. So that's pretty cool, right?
That is, yes.
And I've seen you and your team grow professionally as well. So just give the audience a little bit about what you have done recently. A quick intro as to why you got into real estate law and your education as well.
Yeah, sure, I would love to. And again, thanks again for having us. And I couldn't imagine that we would be sitting here.
I know.
All praises due to God. And our family and our community had a lot to do with us coming together and being able to do this now. But yeah, so about myself, as you know, I left for law school to go to Australia for about 3 years in the middle. And then when I had graduated and came back to Toronto, I applied for a number of articling positions, because after you finish law school, you have to article and gain experience under a lawyer in a particular field. So the most of the jobs that I had applied for were in various different fields, but I had a contact in real estate law by the name of Philip Bradshaw, and he was practicing real estate law for over 40 years. So I had the opportunity to article with him, learn from him about real estate law, really from an OG, in the sense that he was able to pass down information that a lot of lawyers are not privy to anymore, like how to actually read surveys, how to actually measure meets and bounds descriptions, and reading those type of boundary types of issues that come up. So I was able to gain a lot of knowledge from him, and I saw the way that he ran his real estate practice. And I saw the way that he was, able to help people get into homes, buying homes, selling homes, and really growing, their financial portfolios. And I wanted to really be a part of that as well. So, and it was in that moment that I knew that I also wanted to be a real estate lawyer.
Nice, no, that's awesome. And like I said, we've been working together for the past 7-8 years now.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of experiences together as well. Some funny stories, some horror stories, right?
Yeah.
So, before we get to the technical questions, I guess just a brief intro as to, why is a lawyer so important in a transaction, whether it be a buyer or a seller?
Yes.
Because believe it or not, a lot of first-time home buyers that I speak to, when I give them the steps as to what you need to do to buy a house,
yes,
they don't even realize that they need a lawyer.
They're unaware of that, yes.
And it's not their fault, it's just they don't know, right?
That's right.
What role does a lawyer play for buyers?
Yeah, it's a great question. And like you said, especially first-time home buyers, the whole process is a complete mystery, and it's like they're walking into the dark.
Right.
And that's why they have professionals like yourself and then your team that kind of guide them and pass them on to each professional to kind of enlighten the way. So when it comes to the lawyer and the legal part of the work, there's essentially 3 things that a lawyer is responsible for doing when this real estate transaction comes to them. So the first thing is we want to confirm the parties to the transaction, like who's buying, who's who. Is there a corporation that's buying? If it's a corporation that's buying, there's different considerations. The second thing we do is confirm the funds and mortgage information, so making sure the amounts and the numbers all add up, and that so that you as a buyer know how much money you're going to be having to bring to the table to close your deal, so you can get your keys. And then as a seller, how much money am I going to be getting after I sell my property?
Yeah.
And then I can go do whatever I want with that money.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is title, which is kind of the legal issue. So we confirm the title, and if there's any issues with the title, then we resolve those. So that can be anything like liens and encumbrances, or anything that would prevent you as a buyer from getting clear title, or from the seller being able to sell their property.
Okay, so it's more like a due diligence that buyers take when they hire a lawyer, just to make sure they're protected at the end of the day as well, right?
That's right.
So now let's talk about some, I guess, experiences that you've had, some practical stories that you've dealt with. What are some? Give me a story that recently or before that you've dealt with that is just kind of like a learning lesson for a lot of buyers in the market today.
Yeah, that's a great question, Ahsan, and I'm glad actually that you asked and that we have this platform to discuss because sometimes you do feel really bad for some of the situations that people come across, and if they just watch something like this, it can prevent that from happening. So I think one of the most the pressing issues that we're seeing nowadays is buyers have signed an agreement with a realtor such as yourself, and this hasn't happened with you or any of your clients, but not all the aspects of the transaction were discussed before that agreement was signed. So before anything is even discussed, the agreement was signed with these buyers that I'm talking about, and then all the other talks started happening afterwards. So are we going to be able to get a mortgage? How much is the mortgage going to be for? Are we going to be able to get it approved? Who's the bank going to be? How much money are we going to be putting down? So these conversations, which are just really basic for you now in terms of having these conversations with your clients, some people just do not have them, and unfortunately they end up putting pen to paper and signing. So now these clients had a closing date coming up, purchase price that they had agreed to pay for around $1 million, and they put down a very small deposit of around $10,000. And they had another maybe $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 maximum in their savings. So closing date is coming around, and I still don't have any mortgage instructions. The mortgage hasn't been approved. It turns out that their income situation would not, there was no way they'd be able to qualify for a mortgage at that amount that they had purchased for. Which again, if they had that conversation earlier, they would have been able to figure that out. So now the problem is that their whole life savings are invested into this agreement and this transaction that needs to close. They're renting, and they have given notice to their landlord that they'll be leaving. So they have no place to live essentially unless they can close this property. And they're not getting approved for a mortgage. So what ended up happening to these people was they ended up closing the deal, but they had to get 3 mortgages, all from private lenders in order to close this transaction. So as you can imagine, that had devastating financial consequences for these people, really ruined their entire experience of buying a first-time home. Because they are under the impression they're going to have one mortgage with TD, RBC, a big bank. They'll put down the rest of the money they have as the remainder of their down payment, and that'll be it. But because the numbers didn't add up, the stress test that the banks have been introducing in terms of getting a mortgage, and the very strict income requirements that are out there, because these people were self-employed, so they had income, but it was coming in a non-traditional manner, and so. Essentially, yes. So one lender was prepared to only lend them a certain amount, a second lender, a certain amount, third lender, a certain amount, and they all had enormous fees. So they had to borrow money from friends and family just to kind of get this deal closed. And then you can imagine, like, that's not the end of the story. Like, you still have to kind of get out of this situation now. So I think I'm seeing this a lot these days because of the way the market. I wanted to get your thoughts on that as well. Like, because the way that the market has kind of went up and down, a lot of people have signed these agreements. Now they're coming up to close, and they may or may not be getting those values appraised at the values they're supposed to be at. And then the banks also have increased their interest rates and their stress test requirements, making it very difficult for these people to get mortgages.
And that's like, it's such a common issue that I've dealt with, with a lot of, not my clients per se, because, you and I have done a good job of educating them, but a lot of my colleagues and people that I know, like, when the market was hot, it was like, let's sign the agreement. Let's not do our due diligence. And let's just get it to the seller. Let's get it accepted, and we'll worry about the stuff. That's not how it works. Whether it's a hot market or a cold market. Like, due diligence is so important. And one thing that I like about you is that whenever we put a deal together, you have that initial phone call with my clients, right?
Yes, correct.
It's like it's kind of like we're here for you almost conversation, right?
Yes.
And because first-time buyers have a lot of questions, am I going to close on time? What if this happens, that happens? And you're just there to explain the agreement to them, go over some of the conditions, the closing costs, which is very important.
Exactly.
And I feel that this information sometimes is not given to the buyers beforehand. So one thing that our team does is, before we even buy a house, there's 10 steps in buying a house, right?
Oh, really? Okay.
Number one is like, okay, let's figure out your mortgage, obviously.
Yes.
And then along those lines, step number three is, okay, these are the closing costs involved.
Yes.
Land transfer, inspection, whatever. So I
legal
wanted
fees.
you to, yeah, exactly. So I want to touch on that. Like
Yes.
in your, cases, like, can you briefly touch up, what are some costs
Yes.
and how do they vary for buyers? There's land transfers, especially, but like, what is land transfer, for example? What does that term even mean for a lot of buyers?
Exactly. Yes. No, that's a great point. Another great question that a lot of first-time home buyers, especially, have. What are closing costs?
Yeah.
So, closing costs is a term that we've come up with to kind of encapsulate all the other costs that are involved with buying the house, other than what they're familiar with. So they're familiar with the deposit because they would have paid a deposit, and they're familiar with the down payment because they know that, okay, my bank is going to give me a certain percentage, so I probably have to come up with the rest of that.
Right.
So they usually have an understanding of the down payment and the deposit, although sometimes they conflate those two things, and they are separate. The deposit is made up of the down payment, but it's a separate amount altogether. So then they get hit with the closing costs. So what you have to remember when you're buying a home in Ontario is that there's land transfer tax. So what that is that anytime a property is sold in Ontario, the government gets a hefty percentage of that sale price.
Yeah.
So that goes to the Ontario government. In Toronto, if you purchase a property, it's double the tax. So there's two taxes. So there's one municipal tax that goes to the city of Toronto, and then there's the Ontario tax that goes to the government of Ontario. And essentially, it's there is a calculation, a formula behind it, but it's approximately 1.5% of the purchase price based on the amount of the prices that we're seeing now. So it's over 400,000. That's what you're looking at. Then on top of that, you also have title insurance.
Yeah.
So people are like, insurance, I have home insurance. Like,
exactly. What's the difference?
Why do I need title insurance? So title insurance is something that it's not mandatory unless you're getting a mortgage.
Okay.
So if you're getting a mortgage, then the bank will require that you also purchase a title insurance policy. But if you're also buying a house, what it does is that it protects the title to your property, because what happens is that the house that you're buying may be 30 or 40 years old. Yeah. There may have been a complication, some type of transfer that didn't go through properly, some type of easement that was registered on this property maybe 30 or 40 years ago. So when we're searching that property as lawyers, our search may not go back that far, because a lot of these records were transferred electronically in the year 2000. So anything before then, you have to do a kind of a separate search for that. Yeah. So what title insurance does is, like, Nabeel, regardless of whatever is wrong with title and regardless of whatever searches you're doing, we are going to guarantee that if there are any title issues that are there that are not detectable, we will cover those.
Got it. Okay.
So that's why title insurance is very important, and actually it's a one-time payment, and it has various. The cost depends on various factors. For example, the purchase price, the amount of the mortgage, the lender that you're going with. Right. But it's definitely a very good option to ensure the title of the property.
Got it. So if you're a buyer out there watching, like title insurance is absolutely crucial.
Yes.
To protect you again for future issues that come up.
Correct.
So that's a good point. Now, in today's market, what I'm seeing a lot is, because the market's cooled down, right? A lot of buyers I've seen or heard stories trying to back out of the deal right before closing. So I had a situation with a buyer recently, with a seller, and the buyers were doing everything they could to back out of the deal, right? But it was a firm deal. I mean, there was no recourse on that side. But what are you seeing? Like, are you seeing buyers back out of the deal? Are they able to? What are the consequences if they decide to cancel last minute on the closing? What happens?
Right. Great question. And we are seeing this a lot as well. And we tell the buyers in all situations that when you have put pen to paper, or in this case maybe it's a DocuSign, once you have signed that agreement, there's a clause in there that says time is of the essence.
Right.
Okay. So what this means is that all the dates and even all the numbers in this agreement are firm. Yeah. Assuming that the agreement is firm. So what we tell buyers is that no, you can't really back out of this deal anymore unless you're willing to A, forfeit the deposit, and B, potentially be sued for any damages. Yeah. So that's exactly what's happening, is that buyers have signed these agreements, and they may or may not be getting the the mortgage is approved for the amount that they need.
Right.
So what they're trying to do is either trying to negotiate with the sellers to reduce the sale price, which is interesting. In 99% of the cases, I don't see that ever happening.
Right.
But in one case, I did see a case where the seller agreed to reduce the sale price by $40,000.
Wow.
And I'll give you the reason why is because...
It's a nice seller.
Yes. But it kind of worked out. It may have worked out in their favor as well because, as you said, the market had cooled down in that particular area. So if they were to relist and sell, they would then sell for less, and then they would have to sue that purchaser for the difference. Okay. The problem with this purchaser was first-time home buyer, didn't own any other properties, had no other assets, and it may not have been lucrative or financially viable for them to sue this person.
Nothing to sue for.
So it's interesting because I had another case where the buyer did have multiple properties. Okay. So the buyer owned 2 or 3 properties all over Ontario, and they were trying to get out of the deal or at least get a reduction. Yeah. And we did these searches, saw the properties, and we told our client that no, like if he doesn't purchase at the agreed upon purchase price, we will relist the property, we will sell. If it sells for less, then we have 3 properties that we can put liens on that would prevent him from being able to not essentially pay out the seller. So in that case, once we told the buyer that this was a situation, they agreed to close the deal. But it's interesting how that, and in the other case, the seller really wouldn't have any other recourse. I mean, it could have been years before they saw any results from litigation. So they're like, you know what, we'll take the hit. Yeah. It was still more of a hit. They still made money on the deal. Yeah. And so it was okay.
Nice. So you mentioned firm agreement in the conversation. Like firm agreement basically is where, a buyer and seller agree on, going through with the closing. So for example, when a buyer puts an agreement in paper, they have the conditions of financing and inspection. Which are 5. They have 5 days or 5 business days to do an inspection, get their financing in order. Once those 5 business days are done and they're satisfied with the inspection, they've got their financing in order, they have to basically sign a waiver. Yes. Once they sign that waiver, they're basically locked in, right?
They're locked in. That agreement is firm. Those dates matter and the price matters.
Right. But in those 5 days, let's say something comes up in the inspection and they're not satisfied. Let's say the furnace and the roof and the AC are breaking down. Yes. They want to back out. In those 5 days, the buyer can actually walk out and get their deposit back.
That is correct. Right. That is correct. During the conditional period, if those conditions are not waived or fulfilled, technically you can walk out, even if, for example, you did get approved for a mortgage, but you still didn't waive that condition. So you don't have to tell them about your situation. You just don't sign that waiver. You don't sign that notice of fulfillment of condition. That deal dies. And your deposit is returned to you.
That's good because I had this one agent actually. Where
agents think they're a bit smarter sometimes.
So the inspection, it was legitimately it was messed. Like there were things that were messed up in the home. And my buyer didn't want to back out, but he had to back out because it was going to cost him like 60, 70K to just upgrade these repairs, right? The AC was broken, the roof was out of shape. There was a heavy leakage in one of the bathrooms. Wow. And so we said, we're going to back out. The agent's like, sorry, we can't let you back out. What? I'm like, okay. He's like, I want to see the inspection report. And he's like, my lawyer says I have to see the inspection report. I'm like, and I called you. This is like a company I called you. And you're like, no, he has no basis on that. You don't have to show him anything. So as a buyer, really important, especially in this market, you can leave your conditions in the contract most of the time because the market is cooling. I've done it myself. The last 2 deals, we've been able to do a proper home inspection, do the financing condition. In those 5 days, do your proper due diligence, get a home inspector in there. And if you're not satisfied, you can walk out. But if you lock in and say that you're going to sign the waiver and move forward, like Nabeel said, you're locked in, deposit is locked in, and you essentially have to move forward with the closing, right?
Yes, exactly.
So due diligence, again, I've said it a couple of times, very important in the transaction. Know what you're signing up for. This isn't to scare buyers or sellers, it's to give information, right? How to mitigate their risks.
And to work with the right professionals.
Exactly. Get the right information, work with the right professional. So now in terms of comparing pre-construction versus a resale, two different ball games, right?
Yes.
A lot of buyers are buying pre-construction these days, or even in the past. How does it differ, and what would you advise to buyers right now if they want to get into a pre-construction area? Because our contract I've seen from builders, That's long, man. That's 45 pages long. I don't want to read that. I get it. I sent it to you to read, but exactly. What are some things buyers can look out for in this situation?
Yes, great question. So the pre-construction game, I'll call it, because for a lot of people it is a game. We have clients who are legitimately first-time home buyers trying to buy a pre-construction home, and it's their dream home, and then we have investors and speculators and flippers who are also our clients,
right?
And they have different agendas and they have different intentions. So speaking to the first-time home buyers, I would say my biggest advice is don't get caught up with whatever the builder or even the agents are saying.
Okay.
Unfortunately, verbally.
Yeah.
Any promise or anything that's important to you that is essential to be in your new home, it needs to be in writing.
Right.
And signed off by yourself and the builder. So we have many examples of situations where builders, sales representatives would, promise and they talk a lot during these meetings and they promise a lot of things. And then when it comes to closing, which as you know can be sometimes 2 or 3 years later, a lot of those things were never transcribed into the actual agreement. Right. The agreement is just that 45-page document that is the same for every single person. So if there are any additions or any alterations or color schemes or finishes that you really are set on having, please make sure that those are in writing, signed off by the builder. Conversely, we've had a situation on the other side, you and I, where there were some mysterious kind of upgrades and last minute charges where the closing came around, and on the day of closing, literally, the builder informed us that, hey, oh, by the way, we think that your client, got a bunch of upgrades, and you know what, we don't have any record of them paying for it, and so now we're going to charge you an extra $5,000 for these upgrades on closing. And you and I were there scrambling, trying to look in the agreement. There's nothing in the agreement.
What upgrades?
There's no emails, and there's no upgrades. So. So that was an interesting case, and we can talk about how we resolve that later on. But going back to the pre-construction point, yes, like builders are the ones. I want people to understand that builders are the ones who are really much in control of the transaction. And they know that they have the goods, and we, the purchasers, are the ones who want to buy these homes, and that's why. As long as you and I have been in business, these pre-construction projects pretty much get sold out in their entirety within a reasonable amount of time. And so what the builder's attitude has become is that if you don't want this property, someone else will gladly take it. So you take it as is, with our agreement, with all our terms and conditions that allow us to get out of this deal and not you, and et cetera, et cetera. And if you don't want it, somebody else will gladly take it. So that's the main thing, that have everything in writing.
Right.
Even emails are better than conversations. Okay. Having an email from a builder saying, you know what, yes, we will cap your adjustments and your extra charges at $5,000, for example. If you have that in an email, it'll go a long way, that once you get that final statement of adjustments, as you've seen with $10,000, $20,000 of extra adjustments, then we can at least go back to the builder's lawyer and say, hey, your client agreed to not charge us more than $5,000, and here's a bill for an extra. I've seen $40,000 because now builders are claiming that their material costs have gone up and these costs have gone up. So having those caps in place are very important, and having the agreement reviewed by a lawyer during that 10-day cooling off period is very important.
100%. And that's something that, again, your team does really well, is that whenever I have a pre-construction client, even for myself, I know a couple of dudes for my own property, we told the builder that, look, we want to review this contract with the lawyer. I sent it over to you. Within 24 hours, you had a look at it, and essentially you gave me the green light, and you told me, okay, these are some things that you have to look out for.
Yes.
Like hidden fees, for example. Like I'm not going to be able to find that in the contract, but you can tell me, there's a $10,000 charge, it should be capped, or there is, for example, an assignment clause, right?
Yes.
So those are important too. So always get your contracts reviewed by a lawyer like Nabeel, so you don't get surprised on the day of closing.
I wanted to add one more thing. So it's a little bit of a cheap plug as well, because we're going to be doing a presentation on HST, which will be shared amongst everyone shortly, so look out for that. So when it comes to purchasing these pre-construction homes, HST always comes up and is a very confusing topic for a lot of first-time home buyers, because as you know, when you're buying a resale home in Ontario, there's no there's no tax.
Right.
The HST, whatever it is, it's all built into the price.
Yeah.
But when these purchasers, first-time home buyers, see the statement of adjustment from the builders and they see all these calculations for HST, they get very confused. The main thing to remember is that the builder advertises the price that you're going to be paying, assuming that you will be living there.
Got it.
So the builder assumes that if you're buying a house from us, you're going to be living there. What that means is that the government actually gives the builder a $24,000 rebate on HST for every home that they sell.
Right.
In order for the builder to qualify for that rebate, you have to be living there as the purchaser.
Your primary residence.
Your primary residence, exactly. So that's very important that if you are an investor or versus whether you're going to be living there, you have to have that conversation early with the professionals involved, because what can happen is that when your final closing comes around, you might have to pay an additional $24,000, which you may not have been budgeted for.
Correct.
So that's what I wanted to mention about the HST rebate on these pre-construction homes.
Yeah. And when is that seminar again that you're having?
So it'll be happening later this week, but then it'll be posted in the first week of August.
All right. So we'll make sure we promote that as well.
Appreciate
for you
that.
as well.
Appreciate that.
Just a few more questions. We're almost wrapped up here. One thing I thought of right now actually was when it comes to the agreement, it's so important to make sure that you include things that are part of the purchase and sale. For example, all the appliances.
Yes.
Right? A lot of times people don't include that or include all of it. And on closing day, they're like, where's the gas fireplace that was supposed to be here, right?
I get that all the time.
It wasn't in the agreement, right? Yeah. So we make sure we put that in there. But one thing is rental contracts, you know? People need to know that there's rental contracts in the agreement if there's a hot water tank, if the AC is a rental. Correct. Because that can pose to be an issue, right, on closing, right? If you don't know there was a rental contract. Have you dealt with that before? That's
right. That's correct. For the resale homes.
For the resale homes,
Yes. This comes up all the time. And and it's surprising, that just having a quick conversation with the client beforehand can really rectify these issues. So you have to know that if you're buying a home, there's most probably a hot water tank in there.
Right.
And either the homeowner owns that hot water tank or they're leasing it from a company. So nowadays the agreements say that you as a purchaser agree to assume any type of these contracts. So it's very important that what we do in our law firm is that when we get these agreements, we contact the seller's lawyer and ask for that rental contract.
Right. Okay.
So that we can review it and say, okay, do they own this equipment? If they own it, that's great. Then how much is the monthly payment is going to be? If they don't own it and it's something that our client needs to assume this rental contract, let's get that process started earlier so that we know that how much is a client going to be paying per month, and when is this contract going to end, and is it even transferable?
Okay, so I think that perfectly sums up why lawyers are so important, because they do stuff like this where they review contracts, give you all the information, the costs up front. So again, you're not surprised on the closing day. Right. So that's it for all the lawyer questions. Now I'm going to hit you with some fun questions right now.
Awesome, great.
That I didn't tell you before.
Yeah, great.
If you weren't doing real estate law, what would be your dream job?
I
think I have an idea, but I'll see if it matches up.
Yeah, I think I would love to be general manager or president of a sports team.
I knew it.
I have that in my blood already. One of my uncles is actually president of the San Francisco Giants. Farhan Zaidi.
Farhan Zaidi. Okay.
So
with the Dodgers.
He was with the Oakland A's. Started at the bottom, then he went to the Dodgers, and now he's running the show at.
Get us some tickets
for the Giants. I know myself as well included. So next time they're in town, I'll definitely hit you up, and I'll hit him up for sure.
Sounds good. What's one movie that you can watch over and over again that's maybe your favorite?
I would have to say Godfather 2.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just like, I can always watch that. I just think it's just incredibly done. The cinematography, the soundtrack, the acting, the actors, the storyline, just it's my all-time favorite movie. I can watch it all the time.
Yeah, no, it's a classic for sure.
Yeah. I made my wife watch it. She wasn't as big of a fan, but but she did appreciate it.
It'll grow on her, probably.
Yeah, exactly.
Question for you. Would you trade Scotty Barnes for Kevin Durant?
Great question. It's a great question.
That's the toughest question today.
That's the toughest question. So I've thought about this a lot, and the answer is no. I would trade literally everything else except for Scotty Barnes, because that's how much I believe in his potential.
Yeah.
But Kevin Durant is Kevin Durant, and you only get one shot at him, and it would be incredible. But no, I think if you gave up Scotty Barnes, it would really kind of hurt the team.
Yeah.
In terms of even with Kevin Durant, like I think he needs him to succeed.
Yeah, I think it works in the future.
Yeah.
Last question: what's the best piece of advice someone gave you?
This piece of advice anyone gave me was do the things that you can control.
Yeah.
Not like showing up on time.
Yeah.
Nice. Having the right attitude. These two things, I think, someone told me, and they really stuck with me. And it's true. It's something you can really control, regardless of whatever's going on.
Yeah.
You control the attitude when you wake up, how you're going to be, and showing up on time. Like you can really control that. And those two things have like actually allowed me to be very successful.
Yes. That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Nabeel. Appreciate you having on.
Thanks.
All right, we'll have you on soon again sometime.
Course.
Thank you guys for listening. If you have any questions for me or Nabeel, please hit us up, and we're happy to take care of your questions. Have a wonderful day. Take care, guys.